How do children learn?
Welcome to Parenting Matters Now, a source of parenting advice a few minutes at a time.
Hi, this is Dr. Roger Smith with Parenting Matters Now. Children are constantly learning things, but the question is, how do they learn? There's no singular answer to that, and I want to explain. Because it varies with their developmental stage, and I want to talk about from the standpoint of understanding your children as they're developing, what's going on in their brains, and that the way that they learn is changing. And at first, children learn by copying. They will copy the words that you say when they're learning to speak, and you're constantly, you're wanting them to say mama, dada, dog, ball, whatever, and you're constantly getting them to copy you, and you watch them in those early stages, and the games that they will play, they will be mimicking or copying what you're doing, washing the dishes, having a tea party, serving a meal. They will be doing the things that you do, but just copying them. We had this little toy, our granddaughter called it her computer, her laptop, and it opened up and it had some buttons on it, and I would see her copying what her father was doing, and that she would open up this little toy that played a little game, and she would put her hands on it like she was typing, and she called it her computer. She was copying her father. They don't continue to copy. And how do you know whenever they have moved from the copying stage to what I would call the experimenting stage? Well, you'll catch yourself saying to them, "That's not what I told you to do." And they'll go, "Yes, but," and they'll answer it some way to explain that they had a different idea about doing something, that you had told them a particular way of doing things, and that they have taken your instructions and realized that maybe there's a different way or a better way, or I want to try this. And they're learning a different way. They're learning through experimentation. And it's not through rote memory, copying exactly what you're doing, but they're taking what they have memorized and trying something different, an experimenting stage. And so you must, as a parent, recognize when your child is moving from one stage to another, because if we constantly want them to go back to where they were, we're going to frustrate them and they're going to frustrate us. And so understanding that things are changing and that we must respond to that difference. So if they say, if they're then in the experimenting stage, we should begin to say things like, "Well, how did that turn out? Is that what you expected? What did you learn from that?" Any number of things. If we recognize that they are learning, or they're trying to learn something new, we participate in their process and not get frustrated and not correct them, so to speak. And there's a time when they need to do it our way. But sometimes whenever they are stuck in the experimentation mindset, that those things that you have to have it done a certain way, you will have to do those yourself or find someone else. But there is a time at which they submit or surrender to your direction. Just understand that there's something happening internally, and it's not rebellion. Now, there can be rebellion, but lots of times it is that they are just trying to learn and experiment. And so we certainly see it as they grow older and older, and they will begin to move from the task-oriented learning to more of the thinking type of learning. There's a saying in education that children learn to read up until a certain age, somewhere around 4th grade, 9 or 10 years old. And at that point, they stop learning to read, and they begin reading to learn. And so in those latter years, you'll see that they're not as focused on the task-oriented type of learning, but then they move to a thinking or a cognitive type of learning. They'll wrestle with words and ideas, and they'll talk about stuff, and sometimes it's totally ridiculous, but they're experimenting with the ideas. And if we do not overreact to those things, we will allow them to continue to learn, and we want those types of learning processes to include us that can be the sounding board and bring in the wisdom. And so learning how to relate to the different styles of learning is so important, so that we continue to build bridges with our children and not put up walls between them and us, because the relationship in the end is what really matters. And if we can participate in their different styles and different approaches to learning things, we can keep those gateways, those bridges open between us to where we can be the parent that influences them in their latter years and not someone that they run from and hide from. Understand how your child learns and participate in their learning process. This is Dr. Roger Smith with Parenting Matters Now.
Subscribe to Parenting Matters Now for more advice, or go to rogersmithmd.com to search for more topics. See you next time.